What I'm going to say here is just something I'm throwing out there into the world, okay? It's something that's been mulling around in my head. And as you probably know from past podcasts, some of the things that mull around in my head are just a little out there. But I was watching some content creators talk about how they don't think that that Sony's going to do anything in the spirit of the fantastic Fallout series that just launched. That Sony was not really going to do anything with Bungie and the Destiny game. And I've got some speculation here. Big surprise, right? But what if we're not seeing the forest for the trees here? Maybe we're too close to the game world, but not seeing the bigger picture here for Destiny. Now, I know there was some buzz over, some kind of show for Destiny on the horizon since Sony originally bought Bungie. That buzz is kind of quieted somewhat. We haven't heard anything about. Even some doubt that there'll be even any kind of show of some sort in the Bungie realm. Some speculation mentioned an anime series due to the fact that Sony owns Crackle. But let's not forget the massive footprint that Sony has in the motion picture industry. This seed of thought began way back when, God rest his soul, Lance Reddick passed away, and they announced his replacement being Keith David. It was announced that Keith David would be taking over the voice lines for future Zavala, right? What if he's already been casted for Zavala in a Sony production of Destiny? I'm really curious how Borderlands is going to do this August. It's touted as a really big video game series converted into a movie. And I'm sure Sony's going to be watching to see how this does, especially since Lionsgate is the main production company with whom Warner Brothers owns nearly a 4% share of. And I didn't know if you knew this, but Warner Brothers Pictures is a division of, anybody guess? Sony Pictures. So you could say that Sony has already kind of dipped its toes into the video game adapted series. Hell, my favorite adapted video game series was on HBO Max a couple years ago, actually, The Last of Us. That was a PlayStation game. Warner Brothers is also the owner of HBO Max. So you see where I'm going here, right? Sony, I believe, when they looked at purchasing Bungie, probably realized with how much lore and writing and backstory that Bungie put into this game series, that a movie or television series probably could almost write itself. The original material is there. What's really great is that Bungie has tons of options when it comes to where Destiny goes from here. It's been a conversation in our show feedback channel on our Discord. Some have said that we need to go back and tell the origin stories of Destiny, like the Iron Lords and the Battle of the Six Fronts, just to name a few. But some have mentioned that Bungie needs to go totally fresh, with all new characters and environment. Either way, Bungie can do it. I see an HBO Max series about Destiny in the future still, especially with the success of the Fallout series just recently on its competitor, Amazon Prime Video. I see a near-present Earth with an opening with life as usual and a beautiful sunny summer day, and then a huge shadow cast upon the sky, just as the opener to that Guardian storyline. Think of how popular the original Destiny game would become, especially if they already planned a relaunch on PC or Steam. I know, it's an old game. I know that part's a stretch. I'll admit, that part's a stretch. But just as Disney Plus did with the Star Wars franchise, and now that Sony owns all of the rights to the Bungie stories and studio and gaming, what if we're not seeing a big enough picture here? We're so entrenched in the video game world. What if Sony saw an even bigger possibility with the studio and game story? Is it really impossible to see an original Destiny TV series that sets up the original Destiny storyline, just like Fallout did with the nuclear blast over the city at a birthday party? Spoiler alert. You can create an anti-hero like the Darkness that approaches over the Earth's major cities, and then fast forward 200 years like Fallout did, by the way, to present day Destiny. You would be revived by your ghost, and you guys all know where the story goes from there. Sony would have options down the road to create breakout series and breakout Destiny games based on certain popular characters like Saladin, Shaxx, Cade Six, Zavala, the Drifter, Mara, her brother, and the Awoken. All I know is if I spent billions of dollars on a little gaming studio in Washington State with a single IP, by the way, it's what I'd do. because the writing and lore is so rich in this game. And Sithdaddyfresh just talked about some of that lore, how deep the story goes in Destiny. I'm thinking Sony had a management meeting over all this before they decided to buy Bungie. I think when they looked under the hood to see what Bungie had, I think maybe they brought their division heads in, started thinking about a full rollout of Destiny. I know some of you are just shaking your head, and hey, I'm no insider on movie and show development, but I'm a long-time movie watcher and enthusiast, and I can see further down the road at the possibilities. And who knows? You know, the dystopian style shows and movies may soon give way to some other fad or style of movie, but I can tell you this. These movies put butts in theaters, and they certainly put eyes on TV screens in the streaming services out there these days. Fallout, I think, is just a taste of what's to come. Sony sees how well Fallout did on Prime Video and The Last of Us did on HBO Max. Man, that was a revelation of a show. But if you noticed, Fallout, 10-year-old and older games, I think one was made in 97, older than Destiny. There's been a resurgence of players, record numbers jumping back into the Fallout game when it came out on Prime Video. And I think a lot of players went and played Last of Us when the HBO Max story came out. I think it rejuvenated the game series as well. However many versions of that movie or of that game they put out. My God. I think I bought it twice now, maybe 3 times with the PS5. But I can see it being a new live action series on HBO Max in a few years, maybe at the same time as, say, a Destiny 3 launch. I don't know. If the timelines could sync up and if everything went to plan, I don't know. These are just the thoughts I have in my head when I'm working throughout the day. And maybe the sun got to my head a little bit too much here. I'm just trying to understand why Sony would spend so much money on a single product and game. All I know is if I had tons of money to throw at a fully written game, and you know how much money they put into the Last of Us series, and they did it right, an ongoing live service environment like what we have now with the Destiny game and further development into stories and events, I can't imagine a Sony Pictures company that didn't at least take a peek at this. So my question again is this. Are we not seeing the forest for the trees? That's all I'm saying. Now, if nothing like this happens, then at least I feel better that I put this out into the world. Obviously, it would have to be done well. You'd have to spend a lot of money on this. But I think if there's someone who can do it, Sony Pictures might have a little bit of experience in this area, just saying. I can't fathom that Sony would spend billions on a single game studio just for live service gaming expertise. I'm not buying it. I can imagine a much cheaper way to bring in experts in any of the gaming industry to accomplish this goal, including recruiting people from Bungie without having to buy the company. Plus, Mr. Live Service himself, the past president of PlayStation, he's retired. So if that was the purpose of acquiring Bungie, then what does Sony do with Bungie now, if that was their only reason for absorbing this company?